For 15 years, I built my father's failing construction company into an industry leader worth $93 million. Then, at his retirement party, he announced with a smile, "My son James will be taking over as CEO." Not his daughter, me, who had transformed the business. I maintained my composure, but inside, I was devastated. The next morning, my brother strutted into my office and said, "Clear your desk. You get nothing." What he didn't know was that I had spent years quietly securing my position. He never bothered to check the ownership papers. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and the polished smiles of everyone who mattered in the construction industry. 200 guests in formal attire mingled, champagne flutes in hand, celebrating my father's retirement after 40 years at the helm of Harper Construction. The company that, for the last 15 years, had flourished under my guidance. I stood near the stage in a black evening gown, watching my father adjust his tie before addressing the crowd. Robert Harper, at 68, still commanded attention with his imposing stature and authoritative presence. His silver hair caught the light as he stepped up to the microphone, tapping it twice before the room quieted. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," he began, his voice carrying that familiar, gravel-tinged authority. 40 years ago, I started Harper Construction with nothing but a pickup truck and a toolbox. And today, he paused, looking around the room with evident pride. Today, we're a $93 million company with projects across 7 states. The crowd applauded, and I joined in, genuinely proud of what I, had accomplished. When I had joined the company 15 years ago after getting my MBA, Harper Construction had been on the verge of bankruptcy, clinging to outdated methods and losing contracts to more innovative competitors. "None of this would have been possible without family," my father continued. "And speaking of family, it's time to announce the future leadership of Harper Construction." My breath caught. We hadn't discussed succession in detail, but it seemed logical. I'd spent 15 years modernizing our operations, securing government contracts, implementing sustainable building practices that had placed us at the forefront of the industry. I'd worked 80-hour weeks, sacrificed relationships, postponed having children, all for Harper Construction. I felt a slight nudge and looked to my right. My brother James stood beside me, his expression neutral, but his eyes gleaming with something I couldn't quite place. At 35, 3 years my junior, James had spent the last decade bouncing between departments, never staying long enough to master any aspect of the business. He'd been more interested in using the company credit card for client entertainment than understanding our operations. "Leadership transitions are never easy," my father was saying. "But when you have the right person, you know it in your gut." The crowd was silent now, glasses paused midway to lips, all eyes on my father. I straightened my shoulders, preparing to walk forward when called. "It gives me great pleasure to announce that, effective Monday, my son, James Harper, will be taking over as CEO of Harper Construction." The room erupted in applause. I felt as though the floor had vanished beneath me. Through the sudden ringing in my ears, I saw James step forward, waving, his smile triumphant as he joined our father on stage. My face remained composed. Years of negotiating tough contracts had taught me to never reveal what I was really thinking, but inside, I was shattered. My father continued, oblivious to my distress. "James represents the 3rd generation of Harper leadership. He has the vision and determination to take this company to even greater heights." Vision? James's greatest vision had been figuring out which bars stayed open latest in which cities. Determination? He had never completed a single major project without my intervention when things went sideways. As James stepped up to the microphone, his eyes found mine in the crowd. There was no sympathy there, No acknowledgement of what had just happened. Only satisfaction. "Thank you, Dad," he said, his voice smooth with practiced charm. "I'm honored to continue the Harper legacy. Under my leadership, we'll build on the strong foundation that exists and push into new territories with bold initiatives." Bold initiatives. He was already using the language from the strategic plan I had developed and presented to the board just last month. Congratulations swirled around me as people approached James and my father. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server and took a small sip, needing something to do with my hands. Catherine Reeves, our chief financial officer and one of my few allies on the executive team, appeared at my side. "I don't understand," she whispered, her eyes darting between me and the stage. "Everyone expected it would be you." "Apparently, everyone was wrong," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "What will you do?" A fair question. What could I do? My father had founded the company. As the majority shareholder, his decision about succession was final. Or at least, that's what James and my father believed. "I haven't decided yet," I said, which wasn't entirely true. Ideas were already forming, memories surfacing of precautions I had taken years ago when I first recognized my father's blind spot where James was concerned. The evening dragged on interminably. I moved through the crowd on autopilot, accepting condolences thinly disguised as congratulations for my brother. My mother approached, her expression sympathetic but resigned. "I tried to talk to him," she said quietly, touching my arm. "He wouldn't listen." "It's fine, Mom," I lied. "It's his company." "It's your company too," she insisted. "You've put your life into it." More than she knew. More than any of them knew. As the event finally wound down, my father cornered me near the exit. James stood beside him, already looking like he owned the room. "I know this is a change," my father said, his tone suggesting he was being generous by acknowledging the obvious. "But James needs this opportunity. You'll still have your position as COO. Working under me, of course," James added with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'll need your help with the transition, temporarily." I understood the implication. Once James felt comfortable, I would be pushed out completely. 15 years of my life, dismissed as temporary assistance. "We'll discuss details on Monday," I replied evenly. "It's been a long night." James nodded, already turning away, already dismissing me. My father patted my shoulder awkwardly before following him. I drove home in silence, the city lights blurring, slightly as I fought back tears I refused to shed. My apartment felt emptier than usual when I arrived, the space I rarely saw except to sleep now a stark reminder of how much I had sacrificed for Harper Construction. I kicked off my heels and went straight to my home office. Opening my safe, I removed a thick manila envelope I hadn't looked at in years. Inside were documents my father and James had never bothered to read carefully. Ownership transfers, stock, allocations, board resolutions passed during a time when my father had been more focused on expansion than details. Spreading them across my desk, I began to review each page methodically. Yes, everything was in order, just as I had ensured years ago. My contingency plan, created during a time when I had first noticed my father floating the idea of James taking a more significant role. By 3 a.m., I had organized everything I needed and drafted emails to 3 people: Catherine from Finance, Edward Mills, our corporate attorney, and Sarah Thompson, my personal attorney. Each email contained specific instructions and meeting requests for Monday morning. I finally went to bed, but sleep eluded me. The look on James's face kept appearing in my mind, that smug certainty that he had won, that the company I had rebuilt and nurtured was now his to command. By Sunday evening, I had rehearsed Monday's confrontation dozens of times in my head. I knew exactly what I would say, how I would stand, the documents I would present. Monday morning arrived with the clarity that comes from absolute certainty. I dressed with particular care. A charcoal gray suit, crisp white blouse, the pearl necklace my grandmother had left me, armor of sorts. I arrived at the office 45 minutes earlier than usual, at 7:15 a.m. The headquarters of Harper Construction occupied 3 floors of a downtown high-rise with executive offices on the top floor. My office, for now, as James had made clear, had a corner view of the city and the river beyond. I had just finished reviewing my notes when my assistant Michael knocked on the door frame. "Ms. Harper," he said, his expression concerned. "I heard about the announcement. I'm sorry." "Don't be," I replied, with more confidence than I had felt on Saturday night. "And Michael, could you make sure the conference room is ready?" "We'll need it at 9:30. "Of course," he said, looking slightly confused. "Mr. James Harper has requested that same room for 10 hours to address the executive team." "That won't be a problem," I assured him. "Our meeting will be concluded by then." At precisely 8:45, James strode into the office suite, accompanied by my father. They both wore new suits, and James carried a briefcase I had never seen before. He nodded curtly to the receptionist and started toward the large corner office, my father's former office, now apparently his. "James?" I called out, my voice carrying down the hallway. "A word, please." He turned, impatience already evident on his face. "Can it wait, Megan? Dad and I are setting up for the transition meeting." "It can't wait," I replied, my tone making it clear this wasn't optional. "My office, now." Something in my demeanor must have registered because James actually paused. He glanced at our father, who shrugged. 5 minutes, James conceded, following me into my office. My father moved to join us, but I held up a hand. "Just James for now, Dad. I'll call you in shortly." Surprisingly, my father complied, though his expression darkened slightly. As the door closed, James immediately dropped into the chair across from my desk, spreading his arms wide. "Look, I know you're upset," he began, his tone condescending. "But this is business, not personal. Dad believes I'm better suited to lead the company forward." I remained standing, looking down at him. "Is that what he told you?" "Among other things," James replied, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his voice. "The point is, decisions have been made. We need to work together during this transition. And then—" He trailed off, making a vague gesture with his hand. "And then I get nothing," I finished for him. "Isn't that what you told Thomas at the bar after the party?" "I believe your exact words were, 'Once I've figured out how she does everything, Megan gets nothing.'" James's eyes widened slightly. Thomas, head of our legal department, had apparently been more loyal to me than James realized. "That's not exactly—" "Save it," I interrupted. "I'm not interested in your excuses or explanations, but before you start measuring the drapes in Dad's office, there's something you should know." I placed a folder on the desk between us. "You might want to take a look at that." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. James picked up the folder with visible reluctance, as if it might contain something unpleasant. His expression shifted from annoyance to confusion as he flipped through the first few pages. "What is this?" he asked, brow furrowing as he scanned the documents. "Those are the ownership papers for Harper Construction," I replied, my voice calm and measured. "The complete corporate structure, stock distribution, and voting rights." James continued flipping through pages, his movements becoming more agitated. "These can't be right. Dad owns controlling interest in the company." "He did," I confirmed, leaning slightly against my desk. 10 years ago, when Harper Construction was on the verge of bankruptcy. The color began to drain from James's face as the implications sank in. I continued, my voice steady and factual. Do you remember where you were 10 years ago, James? Because I remember exactly where I was. Here, working 80-hour weeks trying to save a company that was 3 months away from insolvency. Dad had over-leveraged on the Westlake project. The recession had hit the industry hard, and 4 major clients had pulled their contracts. James's eyes narrowed. So what? Dad weathered the storm. He always does. I shook my head. No, James. Dad didn't weather anything. I did. I secured the emergency financing that kept us afloat. I renegotiated with vendors when we couldn't pay our bills. I restructured our entire operation while Dad was having health issues. Issues you were too busy finding yourself in Europe to even know about. What health issues? James looked genuinely surprised, and I felt a momentary pang of sympathy. Our father had always been selective about what he shared with whom. He had a minor heart attack, I explained. Nothing that made the papers, but enough to sideline him for nearly 6 months, during which time the company needed leadership and capital. And let me guess, James said, a note of sarcasm entering his voice. You heroically provided both. Not heroically, I corrected. Practically. I liquidated my personal investments and contributed $2 million to stabilize our cash flow. In exchange, Dad transferred 30% of the company's shares to me. It's all there in the documents you're holding. James flipped to the relevant page, his frown deepening. Fine. You have 30%. Dad still maintains controlling interest with his 51%. I smiled slightly. Turn to page 7. James did so, scanning the contents with increasing agitation. The page outlined additional stock transfers made over subsequent years. 5% when I secured the government infrastructure contracts that had launched our expansion. Another 7% when I developed our sustainable building division that now accounted for 1/3 of our revenue. And most significantly, 15% when I had personally guaranteed the loans for our East Coast expansion 4 years ago. This can't be legal, James stammered, looking up from the papers. Dad wouldn't give away control of his company. He didn't give away anything, I stated firmly. Every transfer is documented, witnessed, and entirely legal. Each represents compensation for specific contributions and risks I undertook to grow Harper Construction. Contributions you were conspicuously absent for. So what are you saying? That you own 57% of the company? James's voice had risen slightly, tinged with panic. That's exactly what I'm saying. And as the majority shareholder, I have certain rights regarding leadership appointments. Rights I intend to exercise. James stood abruptly, the folder falling to the floor, pages scattering. Dad needs to see this. This is some kind of trick. By all means, I replied, pressing the intercom. Michael, would you please ask my father to join us? And Catherine from finance as well. James paced the office while we waited, occasionally stopping to pick up a document from the floor, examining it as if searching for a flaw, a loophole. I remained seated, outwardly calm, though my heart raced. This confrontation had been years in the making, yet now that it had arrived, I felt strangely detached, as if watching events unfold from a distance. The door opened and my father entered, followed closely by Catherine. His expression was impatient, but it quickly transformed to concern when he saw James's agitated state. What's going on here? He demanded, looking between us. Dad? James began immediately, voice strained. Megan is claiming she owns controlling interest in the company. Tell her that's not true. My father's expression froze, then slowly shifted to something I hadn't expected. Resignation. Not surprise. Resignation. He knew. James, he said quietly. Sit down. But Dad, sit down. The command in his voice was unmistakable. James complied, sinking back into the chair, looking between our father and me with growing confusion. My father turned to Catherine. The ownership distribution Ms. Harper is referencing. Can you confirm it? Catherine nodded, opening the leather portfolio she carried. Yes, Mr. Harper. According to our corporate records, the current ownership structure of Harper Construction is as follows. Megan Harper holds 57%, Robert Harper holds 36%, with the remaining 7% distributed among minor shareholders including James Harper at 3%. James made a strangled sound. 3%? I only have 3% of the company? You've never shown interest in actual ownership, my father said, his voice heavy. Your sister has invested everything in this company. Her money, her time, her future. The admission startled me. After years of my father seemingly overlooking my contributions, this acknowledgement, however belated, was unexpected. James turned to our father, expression betrayed. You knew about this? All this time you knew she controlled the company, and you still announced me as CEO? My father sighed heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. I had hoped Megan would accept the arrangement, that she would continue to run operations while you became the face of the company. The face? I repeated, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Is that what this was about? Preserving the illusion of male leadership while I continued doing all the actual work? My father had the grace to look ashamed. The construction industry is traditional, Megan. Many of our clients and partners respond better to a man, I finished for him. Even an unprepared, unqualified man who has contributed nothing to the company's success. James stood again, face flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. You can't just take over. I'm not taking over anything, James, I replied calmly. I've been running this company for years. The only difference now is that I'll be doing it with the appropriate title and recognition. And what about me? He demanded. Where does this leave me? I considered him for a moment. Despite everything, he was still my brother. That depends on you. You have potential, James. You've just never been asked to use it. If you're willing to earn your place, really earn it, there's a position for you here. Working for my little sister? No thanks. His voice dripped with disdain. Then sell me your 3% and pursue other opportunities, I suggested. Either way, the decision about who leads Harper Construction isn't negotiable. My father cleared his throat. Megan, surely we can find a compromise. A co-leadership arrangement, perhaps. No, I stated firmly. I've compromised for 15 years. I've allowed my contributions to be minimized and my authority undermined because I respected your position as founder. But I will not compromise on this. Not anymore. The silence that followed was heavy with decades of unspoken tensions and assumptions. My father looked between James and me, clearly struggling with the collapse of his plans. James stared out. The window, his profile rigid with anger and humiliation. Catherine spoke into the silence. If I may, Mr. Harper, the company records are clear on Ms. Harper's position. Legally speaking, her authority on this matter is absolute. My father nodded slowly, defeat evident in the slump of his shoulders. I see. He turned to James. It appears we have misunderstood the situation, son. James whirled around. That's it? You're just giving up? It's not about giving up, my father replied. It's about recognizing reality. Your sister owns controlling interest in this company. That's not something we can change. The fight seemed to drain out of James all at once. He sank back into the chair, shoulders hunched. So what happens now? I stood, straightening my jacket. Now, I'll address the executive team at Tenka as the new CEO of Harper Construction. You both are welcome to attend. I paused, then added more gently, This isn't personal, James. It's about who can best lead this company forward. My father nodded slowly. You've earned this, Megan. I should have recognized that sooner. The admission, so long awaited, felt strangely hollow in the wake of what had transpired. I had secured my position not through my father's recognition, but through my own foresight and determination. The victory wasn't in his acknowledgement, but in my refusal to be sidelined. As Catherine excused herself to prepare for the executive meeting, I gathered the scattered documents from the floor, carefully returning them to the folder. Each page represented a milestone in my journey, not just professional achievements, but moments when I had protected my future against exactly this scenario. Looking up, I found James watching me, his expression a complex mix of anger, respect, and something that might have been regret. "You planned for this," he said. "All. These years, you were making sure no one could push you out. I planned to be recognized for my contributions," I corrected. "I planned to secure what I had built." "There's a difference." "Is there?" he asked. "Yes," I replied simply. "One is about power. The other is about justice." As I placed the folder in my briefcase and prepared to leave for the conference room, I realized something surprising. I felt no triumph, no vindication. Only a calm certainty that I was exactly where I belonged, doing exactly what I was meant to do. The company hadn't been taken from anyone. It had always been mine in every way that mattered. Now the paperwork simply reflected reality. The real work, leading Harper Construction into its next phase of growth, was just beginning. And for the first time in 15 years, I would do it on my own terms, with my own name on the door. The Harper Construction Executive Conference Room fell silent as I entered, briefcase in hand. 14 faces turned toward me, expressions ranging from curiosity to concern to barely concealed anticipation. News traveled fast in corporate environments, and though nothing official had been announced, the tension between James, my father, and me had clearly not gone unnoticed. I took my place at the head of the table, a position I had rarely occupied during my father's tenure. The glossy mahogany surface reflected the morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the city skyline we had helped shape with our projects. I placed my materials precisely before me, taking a deliberate moment to organize my thoughts. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady and authoritative. "Thank you all for adjusting your schedules for this meeting. I know many of you were expecting James to address you today, but there has been a change in plans." Several executives exchanged glances. Thomas Chen, our legal counsel, studied me with particular intensity. As one of the few people I had confided in over the years, he understood what was unfolding. "Effective immediately, I will be assuming the role of Chief Executive Officer of Harper Construction," I continued, meeting each gaze directly. "This decision reflects the actual ownership structure of the company and aligns leadership with majority stakeholder interest." Marcus Daniels, our operations director and one of my father's oldest allies, leaned forward. "With all due respect, Megan, Robert announced James as his successor on Saturday. What's changed?" I appreciated the directness of his question. "What's changed, Marcus, is that the ownership documentation has been formally reviewed. As the majority shareholder of Harper Construction with 57% ownership, I am exercising my right to appoint executive leadership." The room erupted in murmurs. Jennifer Keating, our marketing director, was the first to regain her composure. "Majority shareholder? I thought Robert maintained controlling interest." "A common misconception," I acknowledged. "One that I've allowed to persist because leadership should be about capability, not ownership. However, when those two factors come into conflict, clarification becomes necessary." I opened my briefcase and distributed folders containing a single-page summary of the company's ownership structure, verified by both our finance department and external auditors. "You'll find the relevant information here. The full documentation is available for review by any executive who wishes to examine it." As they reviewed the material, I noticed varying reactions around the table. Some appeared shocked, others thoughtful. A few nodded as if pieces of a puzzle were finally falling into place. David Reynolds, head of our sustainable building division, department I had personally established against considerable resistance, smiled openly. For those who may be concerned, I continued, this transition will not disrupt our ongoing projects or client relationships. In many ways, it simply formalizes the operational structure that has been functioning for years. Marcus, still frowning at the document, looked up. Where is Robert in all this? And James? The conference room door opened as if on cue. My father entered, his expression somber but composed. James followed, his earlier anger now masked behind a careful blankness that didn't quite reach his eyes. I'm right here, Marcus, my father said, taking a seat near the middle of the table rather than at the head, a symbolic gesture that didn't go unnoticed. And I support Megan's position as CEO. The statement, so simply delivered, sent another ripple of surprise through the room. James remained standing near the door, arms crossed, his body language conveying his dissatisfaction despite his silence. This isn't how I planned things, my father continued, looking around at the executives, who had worked with him for years. But plans must yield to reality. The reality is that Megan has been the driving force behind Harper Construction's growth and innovation for over a decade. The company's success reflects her vision and execution more than anyone else's, including mine. His admission hung in the air, unexpected and powerful. For my father, a man who had built his identity around being the unquestioned leader of his company, this public acknowledgement represented a profound shift. That said, he added, straightening slightly, I will be remaining as chairman emeritus of the board. My experience and relationships remain at the service of Harper Construction under Megan's leadership. I nodded, grateful for this unexpected olive branch. Thank you, Dad. Your guidance will be invaluable as we move forward. Turning back to the executive team, I continued. Now, I want to address the future of Harper Construction. This company is at an inflection point. The industry is changing rapidly, with new technologies, environmental considerations, and market dynamics creating both challenges and opportunities. I activated the presentation I had prepared, displaying our current project portfolio, financial position, and market analysis. Our foundation is strong. The question before us is how we build upon it. For the next 40 minutes, I outlined my vision for Harper Construction's next phase: expansion into emerging markets, deeper integration of sustainable building practices, strategic acquisitions of specialized subcontractors, and investment in proprietary construction technologies that could differentiate us in increasingly competitive bids. As I spoke, I could see engagement replacing confusion around the table. These weren't new ideas to most of the executives. Many had been part of strategic discussions where I had advocated for these directions, often against my father's more conservative approach. The difference now was that these weren't suggestions, but directives. I'll be meeting with each department individually over the next 2 weeks, I concluded. I expect honest assessments of your areas, including challenges, opportunities, and resource needs. This is a moment for candor, not impression management. When I opened the floor for questions, the initial hesitation quickly gave way to substantive discussion. Marcus questioned the risk profile of my proposed expansion into the Southwest market. Jennifer raised concerns about how to position our enhanced sustainability focus without alienating traditional clients. Thomas brought up regulatory considerations for the acquisition strategy. These were professional challenges, not challenges, to my authority. The transition was happening more smoothly than I had dared hope. As the meeting concluded, I asked James and my father to remain behind. When the room had cleared, an uncomfortable silence settled among the three of us. James still stood near the door, as if ready to make a quick exit. James, I began. I meant what I said earlier. There's a place for you here if you want it. He scoffed. As what? Your assistant? I shook my head. As Director of Business Development, you have connections and social skills that could benefit the company significantly if applied with purpose and accountability. He looked surprised at the specific offer. Business development? That's a substantial role. Yes, it is, I agreed. One that would build on your strengths while providing structure and clear expectations. You'd report directly to me, with performance metrics tied to new client acquisition and relationship management. James glanced at our father, who remained silent, clearly leaving this decision entirely to his son. After a moment, James asked, "And if I decline?" "Then, as I mentioned earlier, you can sell your shares back to the company at market value and pursue other opportunities with a substantial financial cushion." My brother studied me, something shifting in his expression. "You've really thought of everything, haven't you?" "I've tried to," I acknowledged. "Not out of malice, James, but necessity. I've spent 15 years watching decisions being made about my future by others. I decided a long time ago that wouldn't continue indefinitely." A hint of respect flickered across his face. "I'll need time to think about it." "Take the week," I offered, "but I'll need your decision by Monday. Either way, the company moves forward." He nodded and left without another word, his posture less defeated than contemplative. Progress, perhaps. My father remained seated, looking older than he had just days before. "I owe you an apology, Megan." I sat down beside him. "Yes, you..." Sure, there was no point pretending otherwise. He nodded, accepting the directness. "I convinced myself I was making decisions in the best interest of the company. But the truth is more complicated. I wanted to see my son succeed, even if it meant overlooking who had actually earned the position. It's a natural instinct," I conceded. "But it was wrong, Dad. Not just unfair to me, but potentially harmful to the company itself." "I know that now," he admitted. "Watching you in that meeting, the command you have, the vision, the respect you've earned, it was like seeing the company through clear eyes for the first time in years." He paused. "You're a better leader than I ever was." The compliment, so long withheld and now freely given, affected me more than I had expected. "I learned from watching you," I said, "both what to do and what not to do." A small smile creased his weathered face. "The best lessons are often in the mistakes." He stood slowly. "I meant what I said about remaining as chairman emeritus. If you want my input, that is." "I do," I assured him. "Just not your control." "Fair enough," he agreed, extending his hand formally. "Congratulations, CEO Harper." I shook his hand, then impulsively pulled him into a brief hug. "Thank you, Dad." As he left, I remained in the conference room alone, looking out at the city where Harper construction had begun 4 decades earlier. The company had evolved dramatically since then, from a small local contractor to a regional powerhouse. But the most significant transformation had happened in the past 15 years, my years. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "Executive team buzzing. Overwhelmingly positive, especially the women execs. Drinks later to celebrate?" I smiled and replied affirmatively. Then I gathered my materials and headed toward my father's office, my office now. Michael was waiting outside with a plant and a small sign. "Thought you might want these for your new space," he said with a grin, showing me the nameplate he'd somehow had made in the span of a few hours. "Megan Harper, Chief Executive Officer." "That was quick work," I said, genuinely impressed. He shrugged. "I ordered it 3 months ago, when I first overheard rumblings about succession planning. Kept it in my desk, just in case today ever came." I laughed, surprised and touched by his confidence. "Always prepared, aren't you?" "I learned from the best," he replied simply. As I stepped into the spacious corner office with its commanding views, I felt neither triumph nor vindication, but something quieter and more profound. A sense of rightness, of assuming the position I had earned through years of dedication and strategic foresight. The nameplate on the desk wasn't just a symbol of authority. It was tangible recognition of a principle I had learned through hard experience. In business, as in life, respect is commanded, not granted, position is earned, not given, and security comes not from others' promises, but from your own careful preparation. The ownership papers that had secured my position hadn't been luck or coincidence. They had been deliberate steps taken by a woman who understood that in a world where merit often loses to tradition, the wise builder secures their foundation beyond others' power to disturb. The work ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in 15 years, I would face those challenges with my authority intact and my vision unconstrained. Harper Construction wasn't just a company I had saved or improved. It was a company I owned in every sense of the word. The first month as CEO passed in a whirlwind of activity. I arrived at the office before dawn each day and left well after sunset, immersing myself in every aspect of Harper Construction's operations. Though I had effectively been running much of the company for years, official leadership brought new dimensions of responsibility and scrutiny. Every decision I made now carried the weight of public accountability. My executive team adapted to the transition with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Most embraced the clarity of direction and decisiveness I brought to the role. A few, particularly those who had been closest to my father, maintained a cautious distance, watching to see how my official leadership would differ from my behind-the-scenes influence. On a crisp Monday morning, exactly 4 weeks after taking control, I gathered the executive team to unveil the reorganization plan I had been developing. The conference room buzzed with anticipation as everyone took their seats. I noticed James slip in at the last moment, taking a position at the far end of the table. After a week of consideration, he had accepted the business development position, though our interactions remained coolly professional. "Good morning," I began, standing at the head of the table. "Today marks 1 month since our leadership transition, and I want to thank each of you for your support during this period of change. Your commitment to Harper Construction has been evident in how smoothly our operations have continued." Nods of acknowledgement around the table gave me confidence to proceed. However, smooth transition doesn't mean status quo. As I outlined in our initial meeting, Harper Construction stands at a critical juncture. Our industry is evolving rapidly, and we must evolve with it, not just to maintain our position, but to strengthen it. I activated the presentation display, revealing an organizational chart that looked markedly different from our current structure. This is our new operational framework, effective immediately. You'll notice several significant changes designed to increase efficiency, responsiveness, and innovation. Marcus Daniels leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he studied the diagram. "You're dissolving the regional divisions?" "I'm integrating them," I corrected. "Our current regional structure creates information silos and resource duplication. By reorganizing around functional expertise rather than geography, we can deploy our best talent wherever it's needed most." Jennifer Keating, always quick to grasp strategic shifts, nodded approvingly. "This puts client needs at the center rather than internal territories. I've been advocating for this approach in marketing for years." "Exactly," I confirmed. "This isn't about eliminating positions. It's about optimizing our collective expertise. Each of you will maintain your executive status, though some portfolios will change significantly." I proceeded to outline specifics, changes. Our fragmented sustainable building practices would be integrated across all projects, rather than siloed in a separate division. Business development would focus on relationship-based growth rather than transactional bidding. And most controversially, we would establish an innovation lab to develop proprietary construction methods and technologies. "This represents a substantial investment," I acknowledged, displaying the budget projections, "but one with potentially exponential returns." Proprietary methods that reduce construction time or increase energy efficiency by even small percentages translate to millions in competitive advantage and client savings. Thomas Chen, our legal counsel, raised a hand. The Innovation Lab concept is compelling, but patent protection in construction methods is notoriously difficult. How do we protect our R&D investment? It was an excellent question, one I had anticipated. We'll pursue a hybrid approach, patenting, where possible, while building some advantages into integrated systems that are difficult to reverse engineer. Thomas, I'd like you to work with the innovation team from day one to develop a comprehensive IP strategy. He nodded, looking pleased at the challenge. The discussion continued for nearly an hour, executives raising concerns, offering refinements, and gradually aligning around the vision, all except Marcus, whose tight expression and minimal participation signaled his discomfort with the scale of change. When the meeting concluded, most of the team departed energized, chatting animatedly. About implementation details, Marcus lingered behind, approaching me as I gathered my materials. "You're moving too fast, Megan," he said without preamble. "These changes upend approaches your father spent decades perfecting." I met his gaze directly. "Some of those approaches need upending, Marcus. The industry has changed dramatically. What worked in my father's era won't secure our future." Robert understood the value of tradition, stability, he insisted. "This reorganization dismisses his wisdom entirely. My father built a strong company using the methods available to him in his time," I responded carefully. "I respect that legacy by ensuring Harper Construction remains strong in a very different business environment." Marcus shook his head. "The board won't support this level of disruption." His words contained an implicit threat I couldn't ignore. While my majority ownership secured my position as CEO, significant operational changes traditionally warranted board approval, a board still populated with my father's longtime allies. "The board meeting is next week," I replied calmly. "I'll present the full plan then. But Marcus, make no mistake, these changes will proceed. The only question is whether you'll help implement them or resist them." He straightened, affronted by my directness. "I've given 30 years to this company. And I value those years," I assured him. "Your experience is irreplaceable, but experience must inform progress, not prevent it." He departed without further comment, his stiff posture telegraphing his position more clearly than words. As the doctor closed behind him, Catherine approached from where she had been waiting discreetly nearby. "That went about as expected," she remarked. "Marcus was always going to be the hardest to bring along," I agreed. "He and my father started their careers together. His loyalty runs deep." "Loyalty to your father or to the company?" Catherine asked pointedly. "That's the question, isn't it?" I gathered my tablet and notes. "Keep an eye on him, will you? I need to know if he's organizing opposition before the board meeting." Catherine nodded. "Already on it. David from Sustainable." Building mentioned Marcus approached him after the meeting. Seemed to be testing where David stood on the reorganization. "And?" I prompted. A small smile crossed Catherine's face. David told him that after fighting for years to get sustainability taken seriously, he fully supports a CEO who finally recognizes its central importance. "Good," I said, feeling a moment of satisfaction. "One by one, Catherine. We'll bring them along one by one." The week leading up to the board meeting proved as challenging as I had anticipated. Marcus had indeed begun rallying resistance, primarily among the old guard who had thrived under my father's leadership. They weren't wrong to feel threatened. The reorganization would disrupt comfortable fiefdoms that had developed over decades. Change, even necessary change, rarely comes without opposition. I spent my days in targeted meetings with key influencers throughout the company, from project managers to site supervisors. Rather than imposing my vision from above, I solicited their insights, incorporated their practical concerns, and demonstrated how the reorganization would address long-standing frustrations many had silently endured. By Thursday evening, I had secured vocal support from enough respected leaders throughout Harper Construction that any formal opposition would appear reactionary rather than reasonable. Still, the board remained the final hurdle, and there Marcus held considerable influence. Friday morning, I arrived at the office to find James waiting outside my door, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "Got a minute?" he asked, as I unlocked my office. "Of course." I gestured him inside, curious about this unexpected visit. Since accepting the business development position, James had maintained professional distance, focusing on learning his role while we established new boundaries in our working relationship. He took a seat across from my desk. "I heard about Marcus. He's organizing against your reorganization plan before the board meeting." "I'm aware," I replied, studying him carefully. "He believes he's protecting Dad's legacy." James nodded. "He called me yesterday, wanted to know where I stand." My interest sharpened. "And what did you tell him?" "Nothing yet." James leaned forward. "I wanted to talk to you first." This was unexpected. I had assumed James would naturally align with those opposing my changes, if only out of residual resentment. "I'm listening," I said, setting aside my morning tasks to give him my full attention. "Your reorganization plan, the innovation lab in particular." He paused. "It's exactly what I would have implemented if I had become CEO." "Is it?" I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. "Don't look so shocked," he said with a hint of his old smirk. "I may not have your operational experience, but I understand market differentiation. Generic contractors are becoming commodities. The future belongs to firms with proprietary advantages." I studied my brother with fresh eyes. Perhaps I had underestimated him, not his qualifications for leadership, which remained limited, but his business instincts. "So, where do you stand, James? With Marcus or with the reorganization?" He considered the question carefully. "I stand with Harper Construction's future. Marcus represents its past." He met my gaze directly. "I stand with you, Megan, if you'll accept my support." The offer seemed genuine and strategically valuable. James had relationships throughout the industry that could prove crucial for implementing the new direction. More importantly, his visible support would undermine the narrative that my changes represented a wholesale rejection of the Harper family tradition. "I would welcome your support," I said sincerely, "both with the board and in implementation. Your role in business development will be central to how we position these changes with clients and partners." "I have some ideas about that," he replied, a spark of enthusiasm breaking through his usually guarded demeanor. The sustainability integration in particular opens opportunities with clients who have committed to carbon reduction targets. For the next hour, we discussed specific aspects of the reorganization, James offering insights I hadn't considered about market positioning and client messaging. When he finally left to prepare for a client meeting, I felt a surprising sense of optimism about our professional relationship. Catherine appeared moments later. "Was that James I saw leaving? Everything okay?" "Better than okay," I replied. "It seems my brother has decided to become an ally rather than an adversary." Her eyebrows rose. "That's unexpected." "Apparently he's capable of surprises," I observed. "Speaking of which, what's the latest on board member positions? Any movement?" Catherine consulted her tablet. "We've confirmed solid support from 4 of the 9. 3 are firmly with Marcus, including Wilson and Blackwell. And the other 2? Tanaka is on the fence, leaning our way after your meeting yesterday. Peterson remains the wild card. He hasn't returned calls from either camp." I frowned. Peterson, a longtime investor and my father's former college roommate, typically supported progressive initiatives but valued personal loyalty above all else. His vote could prove decisive. Keep trying, Peterson, I instructed, and see if my father might reach out to him. They still play golf on Sundays. On it, Catherine confirmed. And Megan? For what it's worth, the middle management teams are buzzing about the reorganization. There's more excitement than resistance on the ground. That evening, I called my father to request his help with Peterson. The conversation was brief, but cordial, our relationship still finding its new equilibrium. To my relief, he agreed without hesitation. Peterson respects conviction, he advised before hanging up. He'll back you if he believes you're acting from genuine vision rather than reaction to being overlooked. A pause. For what it's worth, I believe you are. Monday morning arrived with tension thick throughout the executive floor. The board? Meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., with my reorganization plan as the primary agenda item. I dressed with particular care. A charcoal suit that conveyed authority without ostentation, accessorized with the vintage watch my grandfather had worn. While founding the family's first construction business, as I reviewed my presentation one final time, my father appeared in my doorway. "Got a minute?" he asked, echoing James's words from days earlier. "Of course." He closed the door and took a seat. "I spoke with Peterson yesterday, played a full 18 holes. And?" I prompted when he didn't immediately continue. A slow smile spread across my father's weathered face. "And you have his vote, along with Tanaka's." Relief washed through me. With 6 votes secured, the reorganization would proceed regardless of Marcus's opposition. "Thank you," I said sincerely. He waved away my gratitude. I simply told him the truth, that your plan represents the future Harper construction needs, even if it's not the one I would have chosen. The board meeting itself proved less contentious than anticipated. Marcus made his case passionately, but found himself increasingly isolated as each board member voiced their position. When James spoke forcefully in favor of the reorganization, emphasizing how it would strengthen our market differentiation, the momentum shifted decisively. The final vote was 7-2 in favor, with only Wilson and Blackwell maintaining opposition. As the meeting adjourned, board members approached to offer congratulations and support. Their initial wariness about my leadership visibly diminished. Marcus lingered last, his expression a complex mixture of resignation and concern. "I hope you prove me wrong, Megan," he said quietly. "I truly do." "I intend to," I replied without hostility, "and I still want your expertise helping us navigate this transition. 30 years of experience doesn't disappear because we have a disagreement about direction." He nodded stiffly before departing, not quite accepting, but not quite rejecting the olive branch either. Time would tell whether he could adapt to the new reality or would eventually choose to depart. As the boardroom emptied, I remained seated, allowing myself a moment to absorb what had just occurred. 1 month ago, I had been fighting for basic recognition of my role in the company's success. Today, I had secured unanimous approval to implement sweeping changes that would define Harper Construction's future for decades to come. The journey from overlooked contributor to acknowledged leader had required foresight, strategic patience, and unwavering self-belief. More importantly, it had required the courage to prepare for all contingencies, including the ownership structure that had ultimately secured my position. My phone buzzed with a message from Catherine. "Congratulations, CEO. Ready to implement this vision." I smiled, texting back a simple reply. "More than ready. Let's build something remarkable." The real work was just beginning, but for the first time in my career at Harper Construction, I would undertake it with full authority, clear direction, and the hard-earned respect of those I led. Not because it had been given to me, but because I had secured it through preparation, persistence, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your true worth, even when others fail to recognize it. The 6 months following the board's Approval of my reorganization plan transformed Harper Construction more dramatically than even I had anticipated. Implementation proceeded in carefully orchestrated phases, each designed to maintain operational stability while systematically restructuring our approach to the market. The first phase focused on internal realignment. We dissolved the regional fiefdoms that had fragmented our operations, replacing them with functional centers of excellence in project management, engineering, sustainability, and client services. This shift created initial turbulence as long-established reporting relationships changed and team members adjusted to new leadership. I established daily status meetings during this critical period, gathering department heads each morning to address emerging issues before they could escalate into systemic problems. These sessions, initially planned for 30 minutes, often extended to an hour as we worked through the complex interdependencies of our reorganization. The Westlake project team is pushing back on the new integrated sustainability protocols, Jennifer reported during one particularly challenging morning. The project manager claims they'll add 3 weeks to the timeline. Who's the manager? I asked, already suspecting the answer. Richard Hoffman. I nodded, unsurprised. Hoffman had been with the company for 25 years, all under Marcus's direct supervision. His resistance was predictable. David, I turned to our sustainability director, meet with Hoffman today. Walk through exactly how the protocols integrate with existing workflows. Bring your timeline modeling to demonstrate that, implemented correctly, they add a maximum of 4 days, not 3 weeks. David nodded. I've already prepared the presentation. But Megan, this is the third project manager from Marcus's old division to raise identical objections. There's a pattern here. There is, I agreed. Catherine, set up a meeting with Marcus for this afternoon. I'll address this directly. That conversation with Marcus proved pivotal. I entered his office that afternoon with evidence rather than accusations. A detailed analysis showing systematic resistance from his former direct reports, complete with documentation of how similar protocols had been successfully implemented in other divisions. This doesn't look accidental, Marcus, I said, laying the data before him. It looks coordinated. He studied the information without immediately responding, his expression carefully neutral. Finally, he looked up. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that your people are still taking cues from you rather than from the new organizational structure. The question is whether that's happening with or without your explicit direction. Marcus leaned back in his chair, silent for a long moment. They're anxious about the changes, he finally said, looking to familiar leadership for guidance. That's understandable, I acknowledged. Change creates uncertainty. But Marcus, that guidance needs to support our new direction, not undermine it. These teams respect you. If they see you embracing the reorganization, they'll follow. And if I can't embrace it? He asked bluntly. I appreciated his honesty, if not his position. Then we have a more fundamental decision to make about your future with Harper Construction. I value your experience enormously, Marcus, but I need leaders fully committed to our path forward. The directness of this statement hung between us. Marcus had been with the company nearly as long as my father. His institutional knowledge was invaluable, his relationships with key clients deeply established. Losing him would create significant challenges, but less severe than allowing continued passive resistance to undermine our transformation. I need time to think, he said finally. Take the rest of the week, I offered. But Marcus, I need your decision by Monday. Full commitment to our new direction or a transition plan for your departure. There's no middle ground here. The following Monday, Marcus arrived at my office precisely at 9 a.m., expression resolute. I've given this considerable thought, he began without preamble, including discussions with your father, who offered some unexpected perspective. This surprised me. Oh? He reminded me that when he first took over his father's small construction business in 1981, he immediately implemented changes that the old guard considered radical. Without those changes, Harper Construction would have remained a minor local contractor rather than growing into what it became. Marcus straightened in his chair. The parallel wasn't lost on me, so I've made my decision. I'm fully committed to supporting the reorganization, starting with a division-wide meeting today to address the resistance you've documented. Relief and respect mingled in my response. Thank you, Marcus. That's exactly what we need. With one condition, he added. I want to lead the legacy client transition team. These are relationships I've nurtured for decades. Let me ensure they're brought along carefully through these changes. It was a reasonable request that leveraged his strengths while acknowledging the new reality. Agreed. Draft a transition. Communication plan for my review by Thursday. With Marcus's authentic support secured, the remaining resistance within Harper Construction dissolved rapidly. By the end of the second month, our new organizational structure had stabilized, allowing us to begin the second phase of our transformation. External repositioning. This phase centered on the launch of our innovation lab, a concept that had generated the most excitement and skepticism during the board presentation. I had allocated substantial resources to this initiative, converting an entire floor of our headquarters into a collaborative workspace where engineers, designers, and sustainability experts could develop proprietary construction methods. The Innovation Lab's formal unveiling took place exactly 3 months after the reorganization approval. We transformed our largest conference room into a showcase space, with interactive displays demonstrating our initial development projects. Industry press, key clients, and all Harper Construction employees were invited to witness what we were calling the future of construction. I stood on the small stage, surveying the packed room with a sense of measured satisfaction. The journey from that devastating retirement dinner to this moment of vision, realized had been challenging but clarifying. Every obstacle had strengthened my resolve. Every resistance overcome had validated my approach. Welcome to the Harper Construction Innovation Lab, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the room. What you'll see today represents not just new technologies but a new philosophy about how construction should approach the challenges of our time. For the next 30 minutes, I outlined our integrated approach to construction innovation, how we were developing methods that simultaneously addressed efficiency, sustainability, and worker safety, rather than treating these as separate considerations. The audience responded with increasing enthusiasm as our team demonstrated prototypes of modular systems that reduced construction time by 30% while improving energy efficiency and reducing workplace injuries. This isn't conceptual, I emphasized. As we moved to the demonstration area, these systems are being implemented right now in our riverfront development project. The results are already exceeding projections. As attendees circulated through the displays, I noticed James deep in conversation with the CEO of Meridian Properties, one of the largest developers in the region and a potential client we had been pursuing without success for years. Their animated discussion continued for nearly 20 minutes before James guided him toward me. Megan, James said with genuine excitement, Blake Henderson from Meridian is interested in implementing our modular efficiency system in their new downtown project. Blake, a tall man with an athlete's build and the direct manner of someone unaccustomed to hearing no, extended his hand. Impressive work, Ms. Harper. We've been watching your company's transformation with interest. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. We'd welcome the opportunity to discuss how our innovations could benefit Meridian's projects. That's why I'm here, he replied. Your brother has been persistent in suggesting we meet, but I wanted to see tangible evidence of your new direction. Consider me convinced. Let's have our teams connect next week to explore specific applications. After he moved on to examine other displays, James remained, a satisfied expression on his face. That's a potential $40 million contract, he noted. one of many we're now positioned to secure. Your work in business development is showing impressive results, I acknowledged. The market is responding to our repositioning exactly as we hoped. James nodded. It's easier to sell excellence when you genuinely believe in what you're offering. Our innovations are legitimately game-changing. His sincere enthusiasm represented perhaps the most unexpected development of the past months. James had thrown himself into his role with unexpected dedication, leveraging his natural charm and network to translate our technical innovations into compelling business propositions. His presentations to potential clients had become known for their clarity and persuasiveness. The Innovation Lab launch exceeded even our optimistic projections, generating immediate interest from major clients and industry media alike. Construction. Technology Quarterly ran a cover story titled, Harper's Reinvention: How a Traditional Constructor Became an Innovation Leader, featuring an in-depth interview with me about our transformation strategy. By the 6-month mark, Harper Construction had secured 4 major contracts specifically attributed to our innovative approaches, with a combined value exceeding $120 million. Our project backlog had grown by 35%, and employee retention had improved dramatically as talent throughout the organization recognized the opportunities presented by our new direction. The financial results validated our strategy beyond question. Our quarterly earnings exceeded projections by 22%, with particularly strong performance in our newly integrated sustainable building operations. The board, including former skeptics, Wilson and Blackwell, now expressed unanimous support for the reorganization. On a crisp autumn morning exactly 6 months after the contentious board meeting that had approved our transformation, I called the executive team together for a progress assessment. The atmosphere in the conference room was markedly different from our earlier gatherings. Confident, collaborative, forward-looking. 6 months ago, I began, we embarked on a fundamental reimagining of Harper Construction. Today, we evaluate where that journey has taken us and what lies ahead. I displayed our key performance metrics, highlighting the dramatic improvements across operations, client acquisition, and financial results. By every measurable standard, our transformation has succeeded beyond projections. That success belongs to everyone in this room and the teams you lead. The presentation continued with each department head reporting specific achievements and ongoing challenges. The discussion remained focused on refinement rather than resistance, on opportunity rather than obstacles. Even Marcus contributed enthusiastically, highlighting how legacy clients had responded positively to our new capabilities. As the meeting concluded, I remained behind, reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this point of alignment and momentum. The painful moment at my father's retirement dinner felt simultaneously recent and distant, a crucial catalyst that had ultimately enabled Harper Construction's revitalization. Catherine joined me, tablet in hand. The Wall Street Journal reporter confirmed for tomorrow's interview. They're particularly interested in your perspective as a woman leading transformation in construction. I nodded. Schedule an hour, and Catherine, make sure the photographer includes the Innovation Lab team. This isn't about me. It's about what we're building together. Speaking of building, she replied, James asked if you could meet him at the riverfront site this afternoon. Apparently, there's something he wants you to see in person. The riverfront development represented our most ambitious implementation of the new modular systems developed in our Innovation Lab. I was curious about what James had discovered that warranted an in-person visit. That afternoon, I arrived at the massive construction site to find James waiting near the entrance, hard hat in hand. Thanks for coming, he said, handing me safety equipment. I wanted you to see this firsthand. As we walked through the bustling site, the distinctive elements of our innovations were immediately visible. The modular structural components, the integrated sustainability systems, the enhanced safety protocols. Workers moved with efficiency through an environment that looked remarkably different from traditional construction sites. "We're 3 weeks ahead of schedule," James explained as we reached the central section. "Cost projections are running 8% under budget. But that's not why I asked you here." He gestured toward a group of visitors being guided through the site by our project manager. "That's the delegation from Singapore Development Authority. They flew in specifically to observe our methods in action. Their urban renewal project is valued at over $300 million. The significance wasn't lost on me. Singapore Development Authority was known for working exclusively with global construction giants. That they would consider Harper Construction represented a potential quantum leap in our market position. "How did they hear about us?" I asked, watching the delegation study our modular systems with evident interest. James smiled. "They read the Construction Technology Quarterly article. Their sustainability mandate matches perfectly with our integrated approach. I've been communicating with them for weeks, but they insisted on seeing the implementation firsthand before continuing discussions." As we observed from a distance, the delegation's body language conveyed growing enthusiasm. The lead representative, a woman in a tailored suit, nodded repeatedly as our project manager demonstrated specific features. "This is just the beginning," James said quietly. "Our innovation lab has 3 more major systems in development that will make these look preliminary. We're not just changing Harper Construction, we're changing construction itself." His words captured exactly what I had envisioned when fighting for control of the company. Not merely preservation, but transformation. Not simply growth, but reinvention. The ownership papers that had secured my position had been essential not as an end in themselves, but as the means to realize a vision that extended far beyond personal authority. "We've come a long way from that retirement dinner," I observed. James nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You know, I was furious that night, convinced I deserved the position simply because Dad had promised it. It took me weeks to admit, even to myself, that you were right about the company's needs, about the industry's direction, about your qualifications versus mine." "And now?" I prompted. "Now I'm exactly where I should be," he acknowledged, "building client relationships, translating technical innovation into market advantage, and learning more every day than I ever would have as a CEO pretending to understand operations I had never mastered." This honest self-assessment represented perhaps the most unexpected outcome of our tumultuous transition. James finding authentic purpose and contribution rather than settling for entitled position. As we prepared to join the Singapore delegation, James paused. "Thank you," he said simply, "for not pushing me out when you had every reason to, for seeing potential I hadn't demonstrated." "That's what leadership is," I replied. "Seeing what could be, not just what is, in people and in companies." The lesson applied equally to my own journey, from overlooked contributor to acknowledged leader, from fighting for basic recognition to implementing transformative vision. The ownership papers had provided the leverage, but the true foundation of my success lay in the years of preparation, the strategic foresight, and the unwavering belief in both my capabilities and Harper Construction's potential. As we walked toward the future clients who represented our company's expanding horizons, I felt not the satisfaction of having proven others wrong, but the deeper fulfillment of having proven myself right about what Harper Construction could become and about what I could lead it to achieve. 1 year after taking control of Harper Construction, I stood at the window of my office, watching the city awaken beneath a warm spring sunrise. The skyline had changed subtly over the past 12 months, with 3 new Harper Construction projects now visible among the urban landscape, each showcasing our innovative approaches and sustainable designs. My reflection on the past year was interrupted by a knock at my door. Catherine entered with 2 cups of coffee, handing one to me before taking a seat. "Happy anniversary," she said with a smile. 1 year since the reorganization vote. I accepted the coffee gratefully. Has it only been a year? Sometimes it feels like a decade. In transformational impact, perhaps, Catherine agreed. The financial report for the board meeting just came in. You'll want to see these numbers before the presentation. She passed me a tablet displaying our annual performance metrics. I scrolled through the data, each figure confirming what our daily operations had already suggested. Harper Construction had undergone a remarkable metamorphosis. Revenue had increased 43% year over year, while operating costs had decreased by 17% due to our efficiency innovations. Profit margins had nearly doubled in our core business. Most significantly, our project backlog had grown to $2 billion, a record in the company's 40-year history. These are extraordinary results, I said, returning the tablet. Beyond even our most optimistic projections. The board will be pleased, Catherine noted. Even Wilson and Blackwell have been singing your praises to industry contacts. Quite a change from a year ago. Indeed, the transformation extended far beyond financial metrics. Our corporate culture had evolved from traditional hierarchy to collaborative innovation. Employee satisfaction scores had reached unprecedented levels, and applications for employment had tripled as our reputation spread throughout the industry. The Innovation Lab, once considered my riskiest initiative, now served as the company's beating heart. Its developments had yielded 6 patent applications and numerous proprietary systems that differentiated Harper Construction in increasingly competitive bidding situations. The Singapore Development Authority contract, I mused. When is the final decision expected? Tomorrow, Catherine confirmed. James and the business development team are cautiously optimistic. Our bid scored highest on technical evaluation, and the sustainability metrics align perfectly with their requirements. The Singapore Urban Renewal Project represented more than just a lucrative contract. It would establish Harper Construction as a truly international player, capable of competing with construction giants that had dominated global projects for decades. My intercom chimed, Michael's voice coming through. Ms. Harper, your father has arrived for your meeting. This monthly breakfast with my father had become a valued tradition over the past year. Our relationship had evolved from the tension of the transition to a respectful partnership that honored both his legacy and my vision. Send him in, I instructed, then turned to Catherine. Can you make sure the quarterly innovation report is ready for the board presentation? I want to highlight the 3 new developments in modular sustainability. Already formatted and integrated. Into your slides, she assured me, rising to leave. Enjoy breakfast with your father. Robert Harper entered moments later, looking healthier and more relaxed than he had in years. Retirement had ultimately suited him, providing time for long-neglected hobbies and interests outside the construction world. Good morning, Megan, he greeted me warmly. Beautiful day for our breakfast tradition. We took the elevator to the rooftop garden I had established as part of our headquarters' sustainability initiatives. A small table had been prepared for us overlooking the city with the morning sun illuminating the river beyond. The financial report arrived this morning, I mentioned as we settled into our seats. We've exceeded all projections for the year. My father nodded, a mixture of pride and wistfulness crossing his face. I saw the preliminary numbers last week. Remarkable growth, especially in this market. The board is universally impressed. Even Blackwell? I asked with a slight smile, referring to his oldest friend and staunchest ally during the transition conflict. Especially Blackwell, my father confirmed. He cornered me at the golf club last weekend to admit he'd been wrong about your vision. Said the Innovation Lab alone justified every change you implemented. Coming from a man who had initially voted against my reorganization plan, this represented a significant acknowledgement. I accepted it with a gracious nod rather than dwelling on past conflicts. The company has momentum now, I said, turning the conversation forward. The question is how we leverage it for the next phase of growth. My father's eyes lit with interest. You're already thinking beyond current success? Always, I confirmed. Success creates opportunity, but it also attracts competitors. We need to strengthen our advantages before others can replicate them. This philosophy, perpetual innovation rather than complacent satisfaction, had become Harper Construction's defining characteristic under my leadership. We celebrated achievements briefly before immediately seeking the next breakthrough. Our breakfast conversation ranged widely, from specific project challenges to broader industry trends. My father's experience remained valuable, particularly regarding cyclical patterns in construction demand and long-term client relationships. The Singapore project, he noted as we finished our meal. That would have been unimaginable in my tenure. Harper Construction competing for international megaprojects against global conglomerates. James deserves substantial credit for positioning us effectively, I acknowledged. His business development leadership has exceeded all expectations. My father nodded thoughtfully. He's found his place, more fulfilled in this role than he would have been as CEO. This observation reflected the unexpected harmony that had emerged from our initial conflict. James had discovered genuine purpose, leading business development, leveraging his natural talents without struggling to manage operational complexities beyond his experience or interest. We've all found our proper places, I agreed. That's the foundation of our success, everyone contributing their authentic strengths rather than filling roles based on tradition or expectation. As breakfast concluded, my father paused before leaving. I have something for you, he said, removing a small box from his jacket pocket. I've been waiting for the right moment. Inside the box rested a gold pin bearing the original Harper Construction logo, a simple design of interlocking H and C that my grandfather had sketched on a napkin 4 decades earlier. My father gave this to me when I expanded the company, beyond local projects, he explained. I thought about giving it to you at the beginning of your leadership, but that would have been premature. After seeing what you've accomplished this year, I know you've more than earned it. The symbolic weight of this gesture, acknowledging me as the true continuation of the Harper legacy rather than a deviation from it, affected me deeply. I pinned it to my lapel with steady hands. Thank you, Dad. This means a great deal. You've transformed the company while honoring its foundation, he said simply. That's leadership at its finest. After my father departed, I returned to my office to prepare for the day's meetings. The morning's interactions had reinforced how profoundly Harper Construction had evolved in a single year. From a company riven by succession conflict to an integrated organization with shared purpose and unprecedented results. My first appointment arrived promptly at 10 a.m. Dr. Elaine Chen, an environmental engineering professor we had recruited to lead our sustainability research initiatives. Her addition to the Innovation Lab had accelerated our development of energy-efficient construction systems that now defined Harper Construction's market advantage. The thermal exchange system testing exceeded expectations, she reported, displaying data from our latest prototype implementation. Energy consumption reduced by 62% compared to traditional systems, with installation time decreased by 40% using our modular approach. Patent status? I inquired, recognizing the competitive advantage these results represented. Application filed last week, Dr. Chen confirmed. Initial feedback from the patent office is encouraging. Our integrated approach appears sufficiently novel to satisfy uniqueness requirements. This pattern repeated throughout the day. Department, leaders reporting breakthroughs, successful implementations, and strategic advances across all aspects of our operations. The momentum was undeniable, the trajectory clearly upward. Late afternoon brought my final meeting of the day, a video conference with the Singapore Development Authority Evaluation Committee. Though the formal decision wouldn't be announced, until the following day, they had requested this last discussion to address specific technical questions about our proposal. James joined me for the call, his comprehensive knowledge of our bid essential for addressing the committee's detailed inquiries. The Singapore team appeared on the screen precisely at the scheduled time, their expressions professionally neutral. Ms. Harper, Mr. Harper, their chief engineer began. Thank you for accommodating this final consultation. We have several technical clarifications regarding your modular sustainability systems. For the next 40 minutes, we addressed their questions with precision and confidence, demonstrating both technical mastery and practical implementation experience. James handled the commercial aspects flawlessly, while I elaborated on engineering specifications and integration methodologies. As the meeting concluded, the committee chair, Ms. Lim, allowed her formal demeanor to soften slightly. Your proposal has generated significant discussion within our evaluation team. The innovation components particularly represent approaches we have not encountered in previous projects. Innovation drives our company's philosophy, I responded. We view construction not merely as building physical structures, but as creating integrated environments that function more efficiently than conventional approaches permit. Ms. Lim nodded thoughtfully. Your presentation today has clarified our outstanding questions. We look forward to sharing our final decision tomorrow. After the call ended, James remained in my office, his expression cautiously optimistic. They wouldn't have scheduled this final discussion if we weren't among the top contenders, he observed. Agreed, I replied. But the competition is formidable. Meridian Global and Eastern Consortium have decades of international experience. We can't match. Experience in traditional methods, James countered. Not in the integrated innovations we're offering. Their size is no advantage when approaching construction from an entirely new paradigm. His confidence reflected how thoroughly he had embraced our transformational approach, a remarkable evolution from the entitled brother who had expected to inherit leadership without earning it. We'll know tomorrow, I said pragmatically. Either way, the company is positioned for continued growth. James nodded and headed for the door, then paused. A year ago, I thought losing the CEO position was the worst thing that could happen to me. Now I realize it was the best possible outcome. I'm doing work I genuinely love rather than struggling with responsibilities I wasn't prepared for. Self-awareness is a powerful advantage, I observed. Recognizing your authentic strengths rather than pursuing positions that don't align with them. After James departed, I completed my preparation for the following day's board meeting. The quarterly presentation had evolved from defending controversial changes to showcasing unprecedented results. The board, once divided over my leadership, now functioned as unified strategic partners in Harper Construction's expansion. As evening settled over the city, I found myself drawn again to the window, watching lights illuminate the urban landscape we had helped shape. Buildings weren't merely structures. They were physical manifestations of vision, planning, and execution. Much like the company itself had become the manifestation of the vision I had fought to implement. The journey from that devastating retirement dinner to this moment of industry, leadership had required courage, strategic thinking, and unwavering belief in both my capabilities and Harper Construction's potential. The ownership documentation that had secured my position had been merely the foundation. The true construction had been the systematic building of innovative capabilities, aligned leadership, and market differentiation. My phone chimed with a message from Catherine. Singapore Development Authority just requested confirmation of your availability for a contract signing ceremony next week. Unofficial but promising. This preliminary indication suggested we had indeed secured the landmark international project, a validation of our transformation beyond anything we could have anticipated a year earlier. I smiled at my reflection in the darkened window. The journey hadn't ended. In many ways, it had only begun. But Harper Construction now moved forward with purpose, innovation, and aligned leadership. A company transformed not through inheritance or entitlement, but through vision, preparation, and the courage to claim what had been earned through years. of dedication. The ownership papers had provided the leverage, but the true foundation of our success lay in the value I had created long before that pivotal moment. The lesson was clear. Real power comes not from formal titles, but from indispensable contribution, not from what others grant you, but from what you build for yourself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new horizons to explore. And Harper Construction, my company in both legal ownership and earned right, was prepared to meet them all. 18 months after assuming leadership of Harper Construction, I stood on the 42nd floor of Singapore's Marina Bay Financial Center, watching the sunset cast golden reflections across the harbor. Behind me, teams of executives from Harper Construction and the Singapore Development Authority were finalizing details for the official groundbreaking ceremony of our urban renewal project, a $320 million contract that had transformed our company from a regional powerhouse into a legitimate international player. The journey to this moment had been methodical and deliberate. After securing the initial Singapore contract, we had established a dedicated international division, carefully selecting team members with global experience and cultural adaptability. Rather than rushing to bid on every available international project, we had developed a strategic expansion framework focused on markets where our innovative approaches offered distinctive advantages. The Minister of Urban Development has confirmed his attendance for tomorrow's ceremony, announced Leon Chen, our newly appointed Director of Asian Operations. A Singapore native with 20 years of construction management experience, Leon had been our first strategic hire for international expansion. And the technical demonstration? I inquired, turning from the view. Fully prepared, Leon confirmed. The modular sustainability system model is installed in the exhibition hall. Your keynote address is scheduled for 10:15, followed by the demonstration at 11 SAO. The groundbreaking represented more than symbolic commencement of construction. It was Harper Construction's formal introduction to the Asian market. Government officials, industry leaders, and potential clients from across the region would be in attendance, evaluating not just our technical capabilities, but our cultural compatibility and long-term commitment to the market. The media briefing packet includes detailed specifications on our carbon reduction metrics, added Sofia Rodriguez, our global communications director who had joined us from a major European construction firm. Environmental journalists have shown particular interest in our integrated efficiency systems. I nodded approvingly. Excellent. The sustainability advantages are our strongest differentiator in this market. Make sure those metrics are front and center in all materials. As our team continued preparations, James entered the conference room, returning from meetings with potential clients in the financial district. His role had expanded alongside our international growth, now encompassing global business development leadership. Productive afternoon? I asked as he joined me by the window. Beyond expectations, he replied, the excitement evident in his voice. 3 serious inquiries for projects in Malaysia, Vietnam, and Indonesia, all sparked by our Singapore contract announcement. The ripple effect is happening faster than we projected. This regional interest confirmed our expansion strategy, establishing a flagship project of undeniable quality in a key market, then leveraging its visibility to secure additional contracts throughout the region. Rather than diffusing our resources across disparate markets, we were building concentrated expertise in targeted regions. The Malaysian inquiry is particularly promising, James continued. Their sustainability requirements align perfectly with our capabilities, and the project scale would utilize our modular systems optimally. Timeline for proposal submission? I asked, already calculating resource allocations. 3 weeks. I've already briefed the technical team on preliminary requirements. We can develop a competitive bid while maintaining focus on the Singapore implementation. This balanced approach to growth, pursuing new opportunities while ensuring flawless execution of existing commitments, had become Harper Construction's hallmark under my leadership. We expanded ambitiously, but never at the expense of quality or client satisfaction. Our conversation was interrupted by Catherine's arrival. Though still based at our Seattle headquarters, she had traveled to Singapore for the groundbreaking, recognizing its strategic importance. "The Global Operations Report is ready for your review," she announced, handing me a tablet. "And the board's congratulatory message for tomorrow's ceremony has been finalized." I scrolled through the operations summary, noting with satisfaction our progress across multiple international initiatives. Beyond the Singapore flagship project, Harper Construction now had operations underway in Canada, Mexico, and preliminary assessments in selected European markets. The board statement mentions that Harper Construction has tripled in valuation since your leadership began, Catherine noted. Current market estimation places company worth at approximately $280 million. This valuation represented extraordinary growth from the $93 million company I had fought to control 18 months earlier. The ownership papers that had secured my position had not only preserved my role, but had protected an asset that had dramatically appreciated under my leadership. "The financial growth is impressive," I acknowledged, "but the innovation metrics are even more significant for our long-term trajectory. Where do we stand on patent approvals?" 4 fully secured, 3 in final review, Catherine confirmed. The thermal exchange system patent was approved yesterday. Legal estimates its market value alone exceeds $40 million if we chose to license the technology. This growing portfolio of proprietary systems and methodologies represented Harper Construction's most valuable long-term asset. Innovations that could generate revenue through implementation, licensing, or both. While our competitors remained focused on project-by-project profitability, we were building intellectual property with enduring value. As evening deepened over Singapore, our team concluded preparations for the groundbreaking ceremony. I returned to my hotel to review my keynote address one final time, making minor refinements to emphasize themes that would resonate with the Asian market while remaining authentic to our company values. The ceremony the following morning exceeded even our careful planning. Government officials, industry leaders, and media representatives filled the exhibition hall, their interest palpable as I took the stage precisely at 10:15. Distinguished guests, honored officials, colleagues, and friends, I began, surveying the attentive faces before me. Today marks not merely the commencement of a construction project, but the introduction of a new paradigm in urban development, one where efficiency, sustainability, and human experience converge through innovative design and implementation. For the next 20 minutes, I outlined Harper Construction's vision for integrated urban environments, where buildings functioned not as isolated structures, but as interconnected systems optimized for energy efficiency, resource conservation, and human well-being. The technical specifications impressed the industry experts, while the economic and environmental benefits resonated with government officials. The future of construction lies not in building more, but in building better, I concluded. Harper Construction is honored to partner with the Singapore Development Authority in creating that future, beginning with this landmark project. The applause was encouraging, but the real test came during the technical demonstration that followed. Our engineering team presented the modular sustainability systems in operation, showing real-time data on energy conservation, implementation efficiency, and long-term performance metrics. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Technical. Experts gathered around the demonstration models, asking sophisticated questions that revealed genuine appreciation for our innovations. Government officials nodded approvingly at the environmental impact projections, while potential clients engaged our business development team in preliminary discussions about their own projects. As the formal ceremony concluded and transitioned to networking sessions, I found myself approached by Mei Lin, the Minister of Urban Development, whose presence signified the project's importance to Singapore's growth strategy. "Ms. Harper." She greeted me with a formal handshake. "Your presentation was most impressive, particularly the integration of sustainability with practical implementation considerations. Thank you, Minister. We believe that environmental responsibility must align with economic viability to achieve widespread adoption. She nodded thoughtfully. A pragmatic approach. Too often, sustainability is presented as an idealistic pursuit, divorced from business reality. Your systems demonstrate how innovation can serve both purposes simultaneously. Our conversation continued, covering Harper Construction's development process, our long-term commitment to the Asian market, and potential applications of our technologies beyond traditional construction projects. The minister's engaged interest suggested possibilities beyond our current contract, perhaps policy-level influence that could shape future development requirements throughout the region. As the event progressed, I observed James moving confidently. Among potential clients, his natural charm complemented by comprehensive technical knowledge he had developed over the past 18 months, his transformation from entitled heir to committed executive remained one of the most positive outcomes of our leadership transition. By early afternoon, the formal events had concluded, with Harper Construction having achieved all strategic objectives, establishing credibility with government officials, demonstrating technical superiority to industry peers, and generating interest from potential clients throughout the region. The following day brought confirmation of our success. The Singapore Business Times featured our groundbreaking on its front page, with the headline, "Harper Construction Brings Revolutionary Approaches to Singapore Urban Renewal." Industry publications highlighted our technical innovations, while government communications emphasized the environmental benefits of our systems. More concretely, James reported 5 serious inquiries from developers who had attended the ceremony, each representing potential contracts in the $50–150 million range. Our strategic entrance into the Asian market had created momentum that promised to accelerate our international growth beyond initial projections. That evening, I hosted a dinner for our expanded leadership team at a restaurant overlooking Singapore Harbor. The setting offered stunning views of the cityscape we would help transform through our urban renewal project, a fitting backdrop for celebrating our successful market entry. As appetizers were served, I raised my glass to the assembled executives. To each of you who has contributed to this milestone. International expansion requires not just strategic vision, but flawless execution across all functions. You've delivered both. Leon Chen, our Asian Operations Director, responded with a toast of his own. To leadership that values innovation over tradition, capability over history, and results over rhetoric. Harper Construction's success in Asia begins with the vision you fought to implement. The dinner conversation flowed from professional achievements to personal reflections, our team bonding through shared purpose and collective accomplishment. As the meal concluded, I stepped onto the restaurant's terrace for a moment of private reflection, gazing at the city lights shimmering across the harbor. Catherine joined me, handing me a cup of coffee. "Satisfied with how far we've come?" she asked, nodding toward the urban landscape. "Satisfied with progress," I clarified, "but already focused on what comes next." She smiled knowingly. "Which is?" "Scaling our innovations beyond individual projects," I explained. "The Singapore contract has validated our approaches. Now we need to systematize them for broader implementation, proprietary methodologies that can be replicated efficiently across diverse projects while maintaining quality standards." Catherine nodded. "Always 3 steps ahead. That's why the ownership papers you secured were so crucial. They didn't just protect your position, they preserved your vision when others couldn't see it." Her observation crystallized something I had been contemplating throughout this expansion journey. The ownership documentation that had shocked. My brother and father hadn't merely been legal leverage, it had been visionary protection, safeguarding not just my role, but Harper Construction's potential to become something greater than tradition would have permitted. The papers provided the opportunity, I acknowledged, but the team executing the vision has made it reality. As we prepared to return to the dinner, Catherine handed me a tablet displaying an email that had arrived during our conversation. "You'll want to see this immediately. It's from the European Commission's Sustainable Development Initiative." The message was brief but significant. An invitation to present Harper Construction's integrated sustainability systems at the Commission's annual conference in Brussels, with potential application to their upcoming infrastructure requirements. Europe represented our next targeted expansion region, and this invitation provided the precise entry point we had been seeking. "Forward this to James and the International Development Team," I instructed. "We'll need to begin preparation immediately after returning to Seattle." This pattern of strategic opportunity following, demonstrated success confirmed our expansion approach, excellence in execution, creating visibility that generated new possibilities without requiring aggressive pursuit. Our innovations spoke for themselves once given the proper platform. Returning to Seattle the following week, I found Harper Construction's headquarters transformed from when I had left, not physically, but in energy and focus. International expansion had created a palpable sense of purpose throughout the organization, with teams collaborating across departments to support our global initiatives while maintaining excellence in domestic operations. Marcus Daniels, once the strongest opponent of my reorganization, greeted me in the lobby, eager to share developments from our domestic projects. "The modular systems implementation on the Westlake project has exceeded efficiency projections by 22%, he reported. "The client has already inquired about expanding application to their entire development portfolio." His enthusiasm for innovations he had initially resisted represented perhaps the most meaningful transformation within Harper Construction. A cultural shift from tradition-bound thinking to forward-focused adaptation. This evolution had spread throughout the organization, creating a company that valued progress over precedent, results over routine. As I settled back into my office, I reviewed the congratulatory messages that had accumulated during my absence, from industry partners, clients, and most meaningfully, our employees. One note from a junior engineer particularly resonated. "Thank you for creating a company where innovation is valued and implemented, not just discussed. Your leadership has transformed Harper Construction into a place where ambitious ideas become reality." This cultural transformation represented my most significant achievement, beyond financial growth, beyond international expansion, beyond even technological innovation. I had created an environment where talent could flourish, where contribution was valued over position, where purpose aligned with profit. The ownership papers that had secured my leadership had merely provided the opportunity. The vision, execution, and cultural transformation that followed represented the true construction. Building not just projects, but a company designed for enduring excellence and meaningful impact. 2 years after taking control of Harper Construction, I found myself preparing for an event I once thought impossible, a formal celebration of my father's 70th birthday, hosted at our family's lakeside retreat. The sprawling property had been the setting for countless family gatherings throughout my childhood, though in recent years, tensions had made such occasions increasingly rare. The path to this reconciliation had been neither quick nor simple. The wounds from my father's attempt to bypass me in favor of James had healed gradually, through countless small moments of mutual respect and shared purpose rather than any single dramatic gesture. My success leading Harper Construction had earned his genuine admiration, while his willingness to acknowledge his misjudgment had earned my forgiveness. I arrived early on the morning of the celebration to help with final preparations. The September air carried the first hints of autumn crispness, sunlight sparkling across the lake's surface as I made my way up the gravel driveway. My mother greeted me on the porch, her smile warm and relieved, perhaps still somewhat surprised that family harmony had been restored. "Everything looks beautiful, Mom," I said, embracing her as I surveyed the decorated grounds. White tents had been erected on the lawn sloping toward the water, tables arranged beneath them adorned with elegant floral arrangements in my father's favorite colors. Your father's been up since dawn, she confided, pretending to help while really just pacing with excitement. Having both his children here, the company thriving, old friends gathering, it means more to him than he'll admit. I nodded, understanding the unspoken complexities beneath her simple statement. For my father, this celebration represented not just another birthday, but a reconciliation he had once feared impossible, the daughter he had nearly lost through, his own misjudgment now willingly present to honor his life and legacy. "Where is the man of the hour?" I asked, following her into the house. "Down at the dock with James. They're setting up the boat for afternoon rides, though I suspect they're mostly just talking business." The mention of James brought a smile. My brother had arrived yesterday with his fiancée Elena, a brilliant environmental engineer he had met during our Singapore project. Their relationship had developed alongside James's professional transformation, both reflecting his growth from entitled heir to purposeful contributor. I found them at the dock, deep in conversation while arranging life vests in the family's vintage wooden motorboat. My father noticed me first, his weathered face brightening. "There she is," he called, extending his arms. The CEO who transformed Harper Construction into an international powerhouse. The pride in his voice, genuine, unreserved, marked how far we had come from that devastating retirement dinner. I embraced him, noting how he seemed both older and somehow lighter than before, as if relinquishing control had ultimately unburdened him. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said simply. 70. "Looks good on you." James approached next, our hug natural and unforced. Another relationship transformed through honest recognition of our respective strengths and proper roles. "I was just telling Dad about the European Commission's interest in our sustainability systems," he explained. "Their infrastructure requirements could represent our largest contract yet." "Let's save shop talk for tomorrow," my father suggested good-naturedly. "Today is for celebration, not business." We made our way back to the house, where caterers were arranging elaborate displays for the 200 guests expected that afternoon. My mother had insisted on a proper celebration, inviting family friends, industry colleagues, and community members who had known my father throughout his career. As I helped with final preparations, Catherine arrived with her husband, no longer attending as my chief financial officer, but as a family friend. Our professional relationship had evolved into genuine friendship over the past 2 years, strengthened through shared challenges and accomplishments. "The Brussels presentation materials are finalized," she mentioned quietly as we arranged gift tables. "The European team has done exceptional work, particularly on the regulatory compliance aspects." I nodded appreciatively but steered the conversation to personal matters, honoring my father's request to set business aside for the day. This discipline, the ability to fully engage with life beyond work, represented another area of personal growth. I had learned that leadership required not just professional excellence but balanced perspective. By early afternoon, guests began arriving in steady streams: longtime industry associates, former employees, family friends from throughout my father's life. I watched him welcome each arrival with genuine warmth, a natural host despite his typically reserved professional demeanor. The formal program began at 4 o'clock, with guests gathered beneath the tents overlooking the lake. My mother had asked me to deliver the primary tribute, a responsibility that had prompted considerable reflection about our family's journey. As I took my place at the small podium, looking out at the assembled guests with my father seated prominently, in the front row, I felt a moment of profound gratitude for the reconciliation that had made this moment possible. "For those who know Robert Harper primarily as a businessman," I began, "today offers a glimpse of the complete man, father, husband, friend, mentor, and community member. The Robert Harper who built a construction empire is the same man who taught his children to fish off this very dock, who has supported countless community causes without seeking recognition, who has demonstrated that success need not come at the expense of integrity." I continued with personal anecdotes that revealed my father's character beyond his professional achievements, his quiet generosity toward employees facing hardship, his unwavering support for my mother's artistic pursuits, his patient mentorship of young professionals throughout his career. What distinguishes truly exceptional leaders, I concluded, is their capacity to acknowledge missteps and adjust course accordingly. My father demonstrated this courage 2 years ago when he recognized that Harper Construction needed different leadership for changing times. That decision, difficult, humbling, ultimately visionary, revealed his greatest strength, placing the company's future above personal considerations. The significance of this tribute wasn't lost on those who knew our family's recent history. I had publicly honored the very decision that had initially caused such pain, acknowledging its ultimate wisdom while tactfully omitting the intervening ownership revelations that had forced its implementation. My father's eyes glistened with emotion as I returned to my seat. He squeezed my hand briefly before rising to address his guests, his voice steady despite the evident feeling behind his words. "I'm overwhelmed by your presence here today," he began, surveying the gathered faces. "A man measures his life not by achievements but by relationships, and by that standard, I stand before you extraordinarily wealthy." He spoke with uncharacteristic openness about his life's journey, the small-town beginning, the risks taken to build Harper Construction, the sacrifices and rewards of entrepreneurship. Then he turned toward more personal reflections. "My greatest professional pride today comes not from what I built, but from watching my daughter Megan lead Harper Construction to heights I never imagined possible," he stated, his gaze finding me in the front row. "Her vision, determination, and innovative thinking have transformed a solid regional company into an international leader at the forefront of sustainable construction technologies." This public acknowledgement, freely given, genuinely meant, healed wounds I hadn't realized still lingered. The father who had once failed to recognize my contributions now celebrated them before hundreds of witnesses, his pride evident in every word. Similarly, he continued, turning toward James, "Watching my son discover his true talents in business development has been a profound joy. James has established relationships that have opened global markets for Harper Construction, demonstrating diplomacy and strategic thinking that have proven invaluable to our family legacy." James nodded appreciatively, his arm around Elena, his expression reflecting satisfaction in being valued for his authentic contributions rather than a predetermined role. As the formal program concluded and guests moved to enjoy dinner, a prominent industry colleague approached me, champagne glass in hand. Harold Blackwell, my father's oldest friend and initially my staunchest opponent on the board, had become one of my most reliable supporters as Harper Construction's results validated my leadership. "Remarkable what you've accomplished," he commented. "When I questioned your reorganization plan 2 years ago, I never imagined we'd be seeing international expansion and patent portfolios by now." "The company had untapped potential," I replied diplomatically. "I simply provided direction for capabilities that were already present." Blackwell shook his head. "Don't understate your impact, Megan. Harper Construction under your leadership is fundamentally different, more innovative, more adaptive, more forward-thinking. Your father built a solid company. You've transformed it into something extraordinary." His assessment echoed similar comments I'd received throughout the evening, acknowledgments that Harper Construction's transformation under my leadership represented not merely growth, but fundamental reinvention. The ownership documentation that had secured my position had enabled this transformation, providing the foundation upon which a new vision could be constructed. As evening settled over the lake, guests gathered around fire pits scattered across the lawn, conversations flowing with the relaxed warmth that comes from shared celebration. I found myself momentarily alone at the dock's edge, watching moonlight shimmer across the water's surface, reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this moment of reconciliation. My father joined me quietly, offering a light wrap against the growing evening chill. "Beautiful night," he observed, following my gaze across the water. "Perfect for a celebration," I agreed. We stood in comfortable silence before he spoke again. "I've been meaning to ask you something. Those ownership transfers, the documents you presented when James and I thought I controlled the company, you had prepared those years in advance, hadn't you?" The question surprised me, not for its content but for the lack of resentment in his tone. "I had," I confirmed, "not because I anticipated that specific scenario, but because I understood that in business, preparation creates opportunity." He nodded thoughtfully. "You saw possibilities I missed, both threats and opportunities. That foresight, more than anything, confirmed you were the right leader for Harper Construction's future." "I learned from watching you," I reminded him. "The importance of securing your position, protecting what you build. I simply applied those lessons in my own way." A smile crossed his face. "Applied them more effectively than I did, clearly." He turned toward me. "I'm sorry it required those documents to make me see what should have been obvious. That leadership is earned through contribution, not conferred through tradition." "The outcome has been right for everyone," I observed. "The company is thriving. James has found his proper role, and you've been able to enjoy a retirement you initially resisted. A retirement that became considerably more valuable thanks to your leadership," he acknowledged with a chuckle, referencing the dramatic increase in Harper Construction's valuation. "My ownership share is worth substantially more under your management than it ever was under mine." This good-natured acknowledgement of my financial impact represented the final barrier between us falling away. My father's complete acceptance that my leadership had benefited everyone, including himself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.